right, Cassie, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, you are absolutely welcome. We're pumped for this, and for our listeners who are tuning in and who are listening to this. We had some connection problems, but we're able to make it work. We figured it out, and this should go pretty well. So looking forward to it.
As am I. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. We know this is crazy times for everybody right now and everything that's going on. So we appreciate you taking the time to do this and all that. But we always like to start and dive into your softball story growing up and what that was like. And, we've had some guests who had to start by playing baseball because that was all in the area, or it was slow pitch when they started. So what was it like for you growing up in your area, and how did you get started in the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was fortunate enough to live with my grandparents for a while, and my grandpa was a huge baseball, softball fan. So he really was the one who kind of taught me growing up. And I really just played some town ball all throughout elementary and middle school. And then it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 that I really played on my first travel team, which kind of seems late in comparison to what typically happens now. And I was fortunate enough to have the best parents on the planet. And when I started transitioning to different travel teams, they would drive me from New York to Virginia every weekend to play for the Virginia Shamrocks. And then at the time I was playing for a local team called the Huskies, which is now a huge New York State organization. So there, at the time there really wasn't a lot in the Northeast, or at least in my immediate area. So I ended up in high school joining the Jersey Inferno team. We were able to travel nationally, and that was quite a struggle when I first joined. I was definitely not up to par for the competition. I was sitting the bench, probably batting 120 something, barely getting at bats. And, thankfully I had parents that stuck with me and teammates and coaches that stuck with me, and everything finally clicked a couple years later. And I got recruited and went from there. But there was definitely a lot of really good things that lined up for me in my life. I had an unbelievable hitting coach in the area, a couple of mentors in the area, and a lot of things clicked. But there really wasn't a ton of softball like there is right now in the Northeast. Even still, it's still behind the rest of the country, but it wasn't nearly what it's like now.
So you had said that around 13 is when you started playing travel ball, and so you were kind of late to the scene because there's a lot of girls playing a lot younger, and I'm sure you felt that you were kind of behind. And you said it took a few years to click. What were some of those things, especially for the young listeners that are listening now, or the parents of young players? You may be behind, or your kid may be behind, or it may not click for you yet. But what are some of the things that, one, kept you going, and two, we lost you. Oh, there we go. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Okay. Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay. What was it that kept you going? And then two, what were some of the things you did to, get better?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, it was obviously a shock going from what I was playing town ball to then the national level. I think definitely having a support unit in my parents and my coaches, they, I think, saw a version of myself I wasn't capable of seeing at the time. And I think everybody needs a coach or mentor that is going to coach and train them as the person they see them become, not as the person they currently are right now. And that was a really big deal because it's certainly difficult when you're striking out over and over again, or you're grounding out over and over again, to think like, okay, can I actually still play in college one day? Is that still a dream of mine? But I think when you can believe in potential and you can believe in the process, and I almost had to convince myself that failing was a good thing. I was like, okay, every time I fail, the scales will just continue to tip in my favor. And it was just almost naiveness that it was going to eventually click one day. But yeah, I think that was certainly a difficult time to just try to hold on to what I thought I might have been capable of. But I really liked the process. I really liked hitting off a tee at night. I really liked going to the gym in the morning. I really liked that element of it. And I think that was probably a benefit for me because I knew even though I wasn't performing, I still had my process. And that was, if I kept focused on that, that seemed to click for me at least. And that's at least what I try to reinforce with my athletes right now that I get to coach.
Now, one thing I want to ask, because this kind of affects the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Upper Midwest, weather related. issues. Obviously, now we have a coronavirus issue that shut the high school seasons down. But what was that like growing up, dealing with those weather impacts and trying to be at the top of your game when things are as inconsistent as they can be because of the weather? It's not the Southeast or out in California where they get to play 300 days a year. So how did you deal with that growing up? And what were some of the things that you did indoors to make yourself prepared come this time of the year when you would finally get outside a couple days a week to get work in?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, I think it was, again, a little naiveness where I didn't truly realize how great every other part of the country had it until I got to college and I saw you could play outside in January. I think I would have been a lot more envious growing up. But I worked with my stepdad. He helped me hang a rug up in my basement. I had little tiny wiffle balls and my neighbor's baseball bat. I didn't even have my own bat, and I would just hit off of a tee into the rug. And I guess I didn't really know any better. That was the only thing I did know. I had a hitting coach, like I said, Rob Cruz, who worked tremendously with me, and him and Bridget Quimpo were two mentors that I had that I would almost look forward to the winter because I got to work with the two of them. So I think they grew up in this area and they understood, and they kind of made it like an opportunity. Hey, everyone else in the country they have to play right now, but you get an opportunity to practice and like really hone in. You know what I mean? So they were almost making it seem like it was our little advantage. And I do think there's a piece of it where you get to miss the game a little bit and you get to fall in love with the game a little bit in the winter and, hope for the spring. I remember there was one time we were supposed to get a snowstorm in April, and I was so fed up with the snow and the fact that I couldn't play outside. And the year before, I tried to shovel my front yard, and my mom was like, no, you're going to rip up the grass. So this year, I think I was 13 at the time. I pulled all these tarps out and I put them down with huge rocks to make sure that when it did snow, I could then shovel the front yard. And my mom came home and thought my dad surprised her with a home renovation, only to realize that it was just my 13-year-old self lugging tarps around the front yard so I could play softball after the snow.
that is so cool to hear, because I mean, you're at 13 years old. I mean, you have every excuse not to play, and that really goes into and we'll talk about this more later, since now you're on the coaching and the training side. I mean, when you're stuck in the house, there's a lot you can do, whether you have a lot of money or you have the all of the proper tools to be able to have like an effective hitting. Like, effective is just based on what you really make of it, right? So right. I think that's really cool. Like, that's a lot of drive for a 13-year-old to go shovel the yard.
For people to hear right now that are stuck at home when you could be doing so many things to get better right now.
Absolutely. But there's
definitely a lot of creative things online.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's a lot of creative things online for people to get better with now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had talked about getting recruited. The recruiting process obviously has probably changed at least a little bit since you got recruited. But a lot of the same processes are still there. I wanted to know if you could talk about your recruiting process, because it's such a huge thing, especially now, with players that are indoors right now and they're worried, they're thinking about the recruiting process. What was your process like? And then also, now that you've been through it, in hindsight, looking back, obviously you went to a great school and had a great time. But was there anything that maybe you would have done differently or changed looking back at it in hindsight?
Yeah, it's funny. When the recruiting process was getting a little crazy with 7th and 8th graders verbaling, I was thinking to myself, I was like, gosh, I was barely even playing town travel ball at the time, and if that had been the case, I would have never ever gotten a chance to play at the level I did for Alabama and all that. So the process was definitely very different. Actually, in 2008, I went on my official visit for Alabama, and we were the first class to be completely verbaled before our senior year. So I was right at the tipping point of when early verbals before your senior year, before you took your officials, were starting to happen. I mean, even the year before I verbaled, people used to wait until July 1st for this big tournament, and so coaches could talk to you July 1st of your junior year before you were even talking to coaches. So it was so much more delayed. There was, it seemed to be a lot less pressure. People actually really enjoyed the process. There was a lot of relationships you could form with different coaches, which I really enjoyed. It wasn't a fast trying to like, hey, who are you going to? Who are you going to? Let's try to get you before you verbal. There was years of developing a relationship with different coaches, and I thought that was unique and a really cool part of the process. So it's kind of been lost a little bit, unfortunately, and I think the speediness of getting people recruited. But the new law was intact, so hopefully that helps out a little bit more. As far as kind of like what it looks like, or what I was looking at when I was going through it, I just remember not wanting ever to leave the Northeast. I was going to go to a small school 2 hours away from home, and my mom was super happy about that. And then I just fell in love with the University of Alabama. I fell in love with Coach Murphy and Coach Alley, and I was so afraid of being homesick, but I realized that there was no way I could be homesick with the people that were down there. So I certainly lucked out, and it just, a lot of stars aligned. There wasn't like a clear path of me knowing what I was doing, essentially.
So what was it about Alabama that sold it? You know, I mean, obviously, they have really built a foundation since you had committed and, you know, through to today. So what was it then that sold you on wanting to go there, short of, you know, even the SEC probably wasn't as strong as it is now. Then you had the Pac-10, I guess. But what was it about that experience that sold you to go there and go so far away from home when you had a chance to stay close to home?
For sure. You know, it is interesting because if you look at, when I go back and look at pictures, I was on my visit in 2007. Alabama had 2 batting cages that were outside and not even covered. And they had an unbelievable clubhouse. But when you look at what the SEC is now, I mean, they didn't even have the famous Brickyard. There wasn't a ton of seating. It was, the game in the last decade has just exploded. So I think what is so cool is I love the fact that I didn't really go there because it was, look at all these perks that you can necessarily get. Look at how, you know, the SEC has all these national championships. It wasn't the case at the time. It was certainly, when I went down there, Coach Murphy gave me and my family a hug when we got down there, which was a little different for New Yorkers. You know, we went in for a handshake and got a big bear hug. And so I'm on that visit, and I'm watching the way they play. And I always used to sit on the opposing team's side because I wanted to look inside the dugout of the team I was looking at to go to. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, the way they interacted with each other in the dugout. They all had their back no matter what. And I thought that was really special. And even though they hated losing and they got frustrated with losing, it was more of just a desire that they knew that there was something better, not because they were frustrated that they personally got out. So that we before me mentality just was screaming from the dugout. And I just, I don't know. I fell in love with everything, from the white and crimson jersey to the script A, to the way they interacted with each other, to the way they hustled. There was something special, and I couldn't not imagine my life there. So I was so fortunate and very, very lucky that I got a chance to play there.
Can you just talk a little bit about Coach Murphy a little bit? Because, you know, from the outside, watching him on TV, watching the type of person he seems to be, he's a tremendous coach, a tremendous motivator. He seems to always get the best out of his teams, even when maybe he's always had a lot of talent over the past 10 years. But even when maybe they weren't as talented as some of the other teams, he found a way. Actually, we just shared a video of him pinch hitting the freshman for the senior the other year.
Mm-hmm.
And we just shared that with our 8U and 16U teams that we coach, boys, actually, baseball teams, and said, like, you know, there's a lot to learn from this video. But can you just talk about him a little bit? Because, you know, nobody really gets to know him the way you do and the way the players do that interact with him every day.
Yeah, you know, it's so on one of my visits, I remember one of the seniors, Brittany Rogers, who was actually the senior that got pinch hit for in that video. She said on my first visit, my official visit, my first year, my freshman year, and now when I'm a senior, she goes, I've gotten the same hug from Coach Murphy every single time. And he really, truly does embrace that attitude of gratitude. And that doesn't mean that there's a softness to him. That just means there's a genuine kindness to him, because he'll get on to us. I mean, he held us accountable when we needed to be held accountable. And it was, but at the same time, he was able to get on to us, but we knew he loved us first. And he always made sure we knew softball was what we did. It was not who we were. And he made sure that he cared about us as people, and not just for what we did for him on the field or what we did for the team on the field. And I thought the fact that we all knew that he could get on to us all he wanted, we knew where it was coming from. So it just an incredibly special person. And I knew he was special when I played. I've been removed 8 years now, and I think my relationship with him has gotten even better. And something as simple as him just checking in on certain holidays or certain anniversaries that even some of my best friends wouldn't even remember. It's incredible. His thoughtfulness is through the roof. And it's certainly the reason why he's able to get teams to play so well together, regardless if you have you have 10 All-Americans, or just one All-American that they're all playing well together. That's his specialty for sure.
So I'm curious, now that you're a coach, I'm sure you probably took a couple pages from his book and the way that you coach your players. I'm just curious of how much that's transitioned over to you as a coach.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, if I had anybody that I could look up to, it'd be the way he interacted with his players. And I just, there was something too. He had believed in us so much that there were certain times he'd almost look and be like, man, like, how'd you get out on that one? Because I really, truly think he believed that there was not a single pitcher better than us. There was not a single time that we should ever be getting out. He just had that like supreme belief in us. And it was almost like this confidence, naive confidence, So it was interesting just to see how invested he was in us and how much he believed in us. And I certainly try to bring that to all my athletes as well.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the transition into major Division I college softball and what that was like? What were some of the challenges, and what maybe not even so much on the field, but like off the field of being away from home, time management, weight training, nutrition, things that I think have really evolved probably since you went to college and through the past decade. But what was it like for you with all those changes that you had to make?
Yeah. So a couple of things I had never really lifted before I got to college. I tried, I went to the gym and I did what I thought I was supposed to do. But even something as simple as having a smartphone to be able to look things up, I didn't have that in high school. I didn't, you know what I mean? So that something that is so easily accessible, I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. So first time I ever weight trained, first time I ever really had someone teach me about nutrition, someone really teach me about arm care. That all happened my very first year of college. And it was overwhelming in the best of ways to be able to be like, wow, this is the real deal. These are people who know what they're talking about. They're truly invested in us. If anything, I wish if I could go back in time, I wish I would have been able to get a head start on a lot of those things of taking care of my body and really understanding that when you are a Division I athlete, becomes your number one job to take care of your body and to take care of your sleep pattern, take care of your nutrition, take care of your overall health and well-being, because your team is relying on you. And I think that sometimes gets lost because you go to college, you're on your own for the first time, but wait a second, you have to take care of yourself right now. Especially in softball. We played 68 games the year we won the national championship. And if you didn't take care of yourself, that was going to catch up to you big time. But definitely, gosh, I loved it. I loved waking up early and doing all that stuff. But I remember thinking I did everything I could to prepare and looking back and being like, gosh, there's a lot more I could have been doing that I just had no idea about,
Yeah. Well, and then, I mean, when you're in high school, you think you're invincible. You don't need sleep. And I can eat whatever I want and I don't change. And then as soon as 18, 19, 20 hits, especially 25, my goodness, it's not the same anymore. So creating those patterns and those habits early for anyone listening in high school, you might hear your parents say it. You may not hear it as much from your coach, but listen to what Cassie's saying here. This is it's definitely huge. Create that habit now so that when you get to, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III, whatever, you have it. You have at least a base, So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's something as simple too as like, I had a coach in high school tell me that you should eat carbs with the night before a game, and I was like, okay, and of course, the information is out there now where it's like, listen, unless you're running a marathon, and even that, like your body might not even respond well to that. But of course, that was just what we were told. We had nothing to check it against, and we just went with it. So I just feel like the knowledge is so much more accessible right now to the younger athlete. And even still, that's what I try to do at my company, is try to just inform younger athletes, because the demand on their bodies and their minds is just getting more and more at a younger and younger age. So that we're not going to stop that. We're not all of a sudden going to just stop, playing as much sport as they do. It's going to be, how do we take care of our athletes better now? And I think that's really what this community, the coaching community, is trying to do now.
At least we can transition away from like bro science that we grew up with, kind of. in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, especially with all the carb loading and all.
Man.
Like, I'm glad you said that.
Yes,
I really am, because I mean, I spent so many night before games eating just crazy amounts of pasta and
before every football game, every family
drinking chocolate milk by the gallon.
Dinner was a pasta loaded dinner.
Yeah,
an hour, 2 hours for a game.
Exactly.
Yep.
You brought up playing in the national championship game. Can you, you know, it's huge now. It's a massive event. They just spent all this money to renovate that stadium to make it even a bigger venue. For women's softball that had missed the Olympics and now it's going to be pushed back again, women's college softball, the national title is kind of the pinnacle of playing for softball players. So can you talk about that experience and what it was like for you and being a part of that team and what the build up and lead up to getting to that was like?
Yeah, gosh. It was funny. My freshman year, we had this unspoken goal. We kept saying, it's an unspoken goal. And we never really talked about winning the national championship. We just knew that was our goal. And we got to the World Series, and I think it kind of hit us in the face like, oh my gosh, we didn't talk about this all year, because it is so iconic, and it definitely does kick up memories of you watching when you're younger and your aspirations and your goals of celebrating on that field. And if you don't allow yourself to start feeling some of that emotion before you get there, it's going to kind of hit you. And we definitely had a rough first game my freshman year, because I think we were just a little awestruck that we were there and we didn't really mentally prepare for it. So by the time my senior year rolled around, it was my class's third time at the World Series. And I think we weren't as in awe of just the aura that comes with it. But if you don't keep yourself so present and don't keep yourself so focused on, hey, this is the exact same thing that we've done the entire year. Swinging a bat at this home plate is the same as swinging a bat at any other home plate, and playing defense is, if you don't keep yourself in that present, you all of a sudden start to take a look around. You also start to see the cameras. You also start to hear the field. And I'm telling you, like you said, that is such an electric stadium that you can feel it start to shake, or you start to feel the noise of it. It can become very overwhelming, but that's what you prepare for all year. You prepare for it to be, hey, we're going to make everything else more difficult, so this is calm once we're on the big stage.
Now, I've never had the opportunity to be on a stage that big. So I'm curious, especially now. These days, social media has ramped up even since 2012, and everything is everywhere, and anyone can say whatever they want. What were your personal rules? Like, hey, I'm not watching TV. I'm not watching the news. I'm not looking at social media. I'm not looking at comments. I'm blocking off. What were some of the things you had to do to stay present and not deal with the outside voices?
Gosh, that's such a great point. I think Twitter had really just come out, and Instagram was in its infancy. So and then Facebook was very protected. So we really didn't have this huge interaction with the softball community like there is now. And I have to imagine if that was the case, how much more strict I would have wanted to be, or our team would have been, about what we looked at. Even something as awesome as the 7 Innings podcast. I can't believe that we have people who are talking about our sport that's out there. That is another level of distraction for an athlete to be like, oh my gosh, I'm getting talked about. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I know the strategies that I use would probably be very different from today, but I think just having a certain routine, and then also just again, it's keeping your blinders on. We always said we're going to play a nameless, faceless opponent every single time. So we never concerned ourselves with who we were playing, what our statistics were, anything like that. It was, who cares if we beat a team 12-0? If it could have been 15-0, we underperformed. And we were constantly trying to beat our best performance we ever had. We were constantly at practice trying to beat our best practice we ever had. And we were so focused internally on ourselves that I really do think that outside noise just kind of dissipated. And I looking back on it, I think, yeah, we used to sit around and watch TV. We used to watch the games all the time. We never limited ourselves, but I think we were just very confident and protected. And again, it was very, very different. We didn't have as many people talking about us like there is now, but that I think just staying focused on us was our biggest aspect there.
Now, one thing I want to ask before we dive into kind of what you've been doing is I want to get your thoughts on the current team at Alabama, and unfortunately the season's cut short. But what do you see this team? I mean, they have a lot of young talent. I mean, they were very, very good last year. Tough spot at the end of the season. But what do you think the next few years for them at the program looks like moving forward?
Alabama softball was super interesting to see these last couple of years, because last year you really start to see them get fired up and start to celebrate a lot of those successes. And you had, they were so relished in the underdog mentality. And, this year it was completely flipped. They got ranked number 1 right out of the gate. They were expected to win the SEC, and there's a different dynamic that comes with that. So it was so cool for me to see the shift in identity, and to see them, you have to really, really work towards forming that identity when you have a year as strong as you had the year before. So I think the fact that you have the pitching staff that you have, I think the ability for them to, they had 2 freshmen step up big time with people who got injured, and that was so much fun to see. So Alabama softball is definitely on the rise again. You can definitely tell that they have that little swag back that they used to have in the past. They're not afraid to go into stadiums anymore. And I really genuinely hope that senior class ends up coming back, because that will be just such a cool dynamic to see how Patrick Murphy, Allie Habit, Steph Van Brakel, they all bring that many girls together with that much personality, that much passion, that much talent. And I'm sure you guys have discussed this too in the past. It's really difficult when you have 20-something girls and they're all high school All-Americans, Gatorade Player of the Years, and you only get 9 that play. That means you got a lot of studs sitting the bench. That is probably the hardest piece of it, and certainly something that they do a phenomenal job managing at Alabama.
Well, I want to talk about, before we move on to your coaching, I want to talk about the book you wrote. But also, if you could, before you talk about that, you had talked about there's a lot of studs on the team. They're sitting on the bench. We talk about this a lot. The role, your role on the team. You might be a stud coming in as a freshman, but you're not going to play until maybe your sophomore year, get a lot of playing time. So talk about that, the people, how important it is to know your role on the team and then embrace it and be 100% at that role.
Gosh, yeah, for sure. So I still remember this so clear as day. My first meeting freshman year was, meeting all these girls that I just watched play at the Women's College World Series. And so I was just trying to take this all in, and Coach Murphy comes around and he goes, all right. And he looks at the freshmen. He goes, I'm going to tell you something right now. He goes, and it's going to help you the rest of your life. It's going to help you really get it at Alabama. And I was like, oh gosh, what is it going to be? And the first thing he says, he goes, the sooner you realize this is not all about you, the better off you're going to be. And he said that in so many different ways throughout the course of my entire career. Another way was know your role and shut your hole. So that was, but what my favorite part was he not only talked about that, but he then emulated it. And he would call people out when they were doing it the right way. And then we would also get called out when you're doing it the wrong way. And it was always about trying to understand, when you sacrifice, you're sacrificing for the team, which is bigger than all of us. So you're not sacrificing for Murphy. You're not sacrificing for the person playing in front of you. You're sacrificing for the team, which is bigger than all of you. And he would say all the time, he goes, nobody's getting a bigger ring than anyone else. And, I don't know how many people, Murphy goes to the World Series in 2012. He gets on the stand and they say, hey, why are you successful this year? And he goes, our bench. He goes, they're the ones that could have ruined it for any of us. He goes, they're the reason we're here. And he essentially created a new position on our team and talked about how important that role was. And when you start getting everyone appreciating everyone else's role, that's when magic starts to happen. So that's, I know that was a little bit of a tangent there, but that was such a big deal for us that year.
Loved it.
I saw a quote of his too from a while ago that was, uncoachable kids become unemployed adults. And I saw that probably about 6 or 7 years ago, honestly, before I ever even knew who this man was, before my daughter really got into softball like she is now, and I paid more attention to it. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty good line.
Yeah, because we all know that.
Yeah.
We all know those kids growing up, young coachable kids, Yeah, definitely.
Now,
sure.
If you can, talk about your book before we dive into your coaching stuff. How did this idea come about? And what is the premise of the book, and what all do you dive into with it?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. Graduated in 2012, and I moved to Iowa for my master's degree. There was a master's that I was program with two professors. So I was living in the middle of Iowa. It was my first year not playing softball my entire life. And I was either doing FaceTime sessions or traveling to different teams in the area, giving talks about our team and how we won the national championship. And I started to realize that my favorite part of my day, or what I was looking forward to, was sharing those stories. So I called Bridget Quimpo, one of my mentors. I called her and I said, Bridget, I think I want to do a website, or I want to do a leadership thing. I want to just share these stories of how we won the national championship. And she goes, She goes, you're writing a book. I said, no. She goes, you live in Iowa. You got a lot of time in your hands. She goes, go write yourself a book. And, it kind of started off as like just dumping my brain out. I had journaled all 4 years of college, and I just, honestly, I missed it. Probably my own therapy for leading the game and how much I missed being a part of that team. But I lived in Iowa. I would every Wednesday clear my schedule, and I would go to a coffee house for 6 hours, and I would listen to the audio recordings I took throughout the week and the notes I took throughout the week. And I talked to a lot of people, and the book kind of just started to form. And I did a flashback between each chapter of the day of the national championship game. So it kind of just takes you through the entire day of the game. And then in between each flashback is a lesson that we learned at Alabama. So that's kind of how I structured the book. And my hope was if it could help one girl who played this sport, it was going to be worth it. I wasn't planning on being an author. This was kind of just a passion project, and it worked out. The book is now 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 years old. So
and it's called Finished It, right?
Yes.
All right.
Now, do you have any other projects in the works that you've not living in Iowa and you don't have as much time on your hands, but are you writing about anything else now?
You know what? It's kind of been like a mixed bag of things. I've been in touch with actually someone I'll recommend for your podcast coming up, but I've been in touch with a lot of people. I do want to get into that. I do want to try to get a book going again. And I do have a couple ideas, and it's funny. Obviously this time right now is a very odd time with COVID-19 kind of taking over our world right now, but there is an opportunity for a little reflection and hopefully some time for some more passion projects like that. So we'll see where that goes.
It's definitely hitting us all, but I mean, that would be so cool. And I definitely want to check out that book. I apologize that I haven't read it yet, but actually,
no apologies.
One of the listeners actually popped up on the screen here, and they said they read your book and it was fantastic, and they would recommend it to anybody.
Very cool.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
And I want to ask real quick before we move into your coaching too, how did your online training session today with the package deal go? Because that's a whole new thing that they're getting into with this epidemic hitting everybody and all the kids being home from school. So what did you teach today and how did it go?
Yeah, you know what a great idea that is. What a great thing it is to just kind of get the softball community together during a time like this. But I taught about the science of hitting, and I got my master's in biomechanics. I got to study my thesis on swing velocity and swing mechanics, and then I've taught the swing for about 10 years now. So it was cool to be able to just share some different aspects of how I teach the swing. I know they have a lot of hitting coaches on there, so I was trying to just give something a little different as to the progression of how you would teach an athlete, and a few drills to implement while you're home and maybe can't swing off a tee. So that's what I talked about.
That's excellent. Well, talk about what you're doing today, your business, the name of it, and then what your overall, like what you do, and what's your goal with it, and we'll start with there, then we'll dig into even
Perfect.
further.
Yeah. So so when I came home from Iowa for a break, I met somebody who was interested, and I had no idea what I was meeting with him about. I think I thought I was meeting with him about research, and he sat down and I realized I was on a job interview, and I was like, what is going on? And he's like, yeah, listen, there's this warehouse and I want to turn it into a training facility. Just the level of training has been so subpar for athletes, especially in this area. So I fell in love with the whole idea of it. And I was like, yeah, let's go check the place out. And, I get there and I realize I'm at an abandoned warehouse with this guy I've met maybe 10 minutes ago. But
everything your parents wanted for you. I'll say everything your parents had envisioned with you going to graduate school, I'm sure.
I know, right?
It sounds like a good book. I'm just kidding. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's totally fine. I dropped a pin to my mom and I said, if you don't hear from me in 10 minutes, come on, give me a call. I said, this is where I'm at. So, but you know, that person ended up becoming my business partner, and we started Athletes Warehouse in 2014. And it has grown into such an awesome community of athletes for Westchester County, which is the county that we're in. It's the first one that borders New York City. And our team consists of a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a nutritionist, a performance psychologist. We have 3 strength and conditioning coaches. We have a former Major League Baseball player who works with our throwing mechanics, and I'm really the hitting specialist. So we've essentially looked and said, what could an athlete possibly need when they are going through their sport, going through their career? And we've tried to give them that opportunity to interact with coaches and get it done in one building. So Softball Strength Academy is really the softball section of Athletes Warehouse, and Instagram has been this tremendous resource for me to be able to share a lot of the drills that I've used and learned from, because as our sport has gotten more popular, so has the research end of our sport. The only problem is that people who are doing the research are typically not the ones that played. So my ultimate goal with Softball Strength Academy was to kind of take all this information, all this research that was out there, and try to get it into a little bit more of a tangible form so that athletes could benefit from it, and then coaches and parents can work on it with their teams and their athletes. So that's really where I'm at right now. We've been doing that for the last 6 years. We have such a solid team of athletes that I miss like crazy. I've never taken 8 days off in my entire life. So it's been 8 days of no coaching, and I certainly miss my athletes, but it's all for the better. Once this thing passes, hopefully we'll have everyone back at Athletes Warehouse rocking again soon.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you this because you've studied the science of the swing. I love geeking out about this with people that know more than I do. Because I'm a guy. It's I have to see myself doing something because I feel one thing, and then I see myself doing another thing, and that's all I got. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what I was doing just because I just saw the video, but I don't really understand a lot of it. So if you could break down when you have someone come to you, first, what is one of the most common flaws you see in people's swings that they're not doing correctly? And then from there, like, what do you look for to make sure you have someone swinging the proper way and getting the most optimum power and bat speed from them?
Yeah, so I guess to answer the first, or answer one question you had about what are common flaws that I see, it kind of varies depending on the age level. So you have this 10, 11, 12-year-old who comes in, and a lot of times they're just on the cusp of starting to grow, or they're kind of learning their swing. So like understanding their body and understanding, like you just said, what exactly is my body doing when I can't see it or feel it. So I'm just really focusing on positioning, right? Hey, do you feel this position? Are you capable of getting in this position? And if you're not, where are we compensating? Because at that time period is the time when athletes are not the best movers, they're great compensators, right? So they're going to figure out a way to swing a bat even when it's not correct. And we want to try to mitigate their risk of injury later on if they plan on playing this in their career. So we'll take a look at typically their stride length gets thrown off as they start to grow. So we'll take a look at that to make sure they're not coming up out of their hips. As they also start to grow, the strength that they typically in coordination they have with their lower half goes down. So we'll focus a little bit more on the lower body strength. As they get to this like 13, 14, 15-year-old level, a lot of times hand pass gets thrown off because pitch movement starts to get a little bit better. So we start to focus on where is it? What pitch are you looking at? Where is it going to end up? And then how do we get our body there? And we'll work a ton on the inside, outside, high, low, recognizing spin, whatever that may be. And then as an athlete gets 18, 19, 20, 21, we're really not trying to change anything much about their swing because they're kind of at that phase where we're not going to change much. It's going to be, hey, what's our pitch selection look like? What's our timing look like? And like, are we really trusting our swing when we take our swings? Or are we kind of just, maybe I'm swinging, maybe I'm not? And mentality, confidence, dealing with adversity, that all becomes way more of a focus for us as they get a little bit older. When someone first comes in, though, and we're trying to work with them, my number one goal is that they don't need me one day, that they know more about their swing than any coach, any parent, or any athlete with them is going to know. Because I would hate a scenario where a girl is told, hey, you're doing this, and she tries to correct it when that really wasn't the main part of her issue. I want her to be able to be like, you know what? The ball just went this way. That means this is happening. This is the drill I have to do to correct her. This is what I have to think about to correct it. And they don't have to have anyone tell them what's going on. So just overall awareness, and that becomes so empowering, especially to a young female. They're confident when they know exactly how to correct what they have going on. Their confidence goes through the roof. And that is huge for them to be able to feel empowered in that box. So again, a super long-winded answer, but I hope I hit on everything there.
It's okay. I asked loaded questions, and that's my fault. But everything you said, it was absolutely what I wanted. It was perfect.
I'll say one thing I want to ask about it in that long-winded question that I was loving. Answer. I'm sorry, not question. One thing that I've dealt with as a coach is that from the younger age groups, kids pitching isn't as good. You know, you kind of get in this take a strike mentality. Let's make, da-da-da-da-da. You get to that 15, 16, 17, the pitching starts getting a lot better. It gets a lot harder to hit. How do you convince your athletes to get aggressive in the batter's box? Because I find so many kids are defensive hitters as opposed to being like a Lauren Chamberlain who's like ready to just mash every time they take a swing, and people like that in the game. How do you convince hitters that it's offense when you're in the batter's box and not defense? And don't get me wrong, when you get to D1, college level, 65, 70 miles an hour, it's not easy. But how do you teach kids to get offensive in the batter's box?
You know what? That's a great question. And to be honest, I certainly struggled with that myself growing up big time. And even when I got to college, I struggled with it. It wasn't like all of a sudden I was on a college team and I was super confident and rest assured in all my abilities. So I stole a little bit of this from my hitting coach, Rob. But he used to talk about having an alter ego when you got to play in the field. And then when we got to Alabama, we had this giant Superman logo on the door, meaning Clark Kent is Clark Kent, but the second he just changes his clothes, he's a completely different person. And, I talk to my athletes a lot about confidence. The first thing I ask them when they come in the door is, what's your confidence right now at the plate on a scale of 1 to 10? But you can't pick a 7 because everyone wants to pick a 7 and that means nothing to me. But 8 and 6 means a little bit more. And we start to talk. I start to get a feel of what the athlete's feeling like and where they're at. And I have some girls who are the confident person when they're playing basketball, but they step in the box and they're not quite there. So we have to try to talk about the way they feel when they play basketball and how we can potentially transfer that to other parts of their life. And just honestly getting to know that type of person. You're going to have some athletes who just don't have a naturally aggressive personality, but you can still work within their personality to try to get them to be the most effective hitter that they can be at the plate. And I think that communication and that relationship between a coach and athlete, it does wonders. But certainly that alter ego. And I'll often ask them, who's the most confident person you've ever played against or played with, or who's the best hitter you ever saw? And they would explain to me why. They're like, she just looked like she knew she was going to hit it. Her shoulders were here. Her head was here. She walked with swag to the plate. And I said, okay. I said, if you've never experienced that yourself, you would have never been able to recognize it in someone else. So I know you have that in you somewhere. And now it's just trusting and start acting like the most confident hitter on the planet, and then start to see how you feel. And sometimes their homework is not to practice off a tee at night. It's to film themselves walking to the plate and watching how they look. So I think that has helped a lot with my younger hitters, and hopefully trying to just instill that confidence across the board for them.
Now, on the other hand, you see good hitters get in a slump, and then they start to doubt things when they shouldn't. What do you do in those situations? I think we've all seen that. We've seen it in our own kids. We've seen it in kids we coach. Parents see it from the sidelines, and sometimes some parents yell at their kids. Sometimes, they don't or whatever. But what do you say to those kids or those parents or coaches out there that are listening, that when there's a talented kid that's struggling, how do you get them back on track?
For sure. It's almost like quicksand. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen it work where someone gets yelled at when they're struggling, and then all of a sudden they just naturally step out of it and feel so much better. Like, man, that, being yelled at when I was struggling has, helped a lot. So I think, again, that goes back to personality. You're going to see what works best for different types of personalities. The mental game is huge. Being able to articulate how you're feeling, articulate your ability to handle adversity, how you want to get out of a red light. Let's say, maybe some people strike out their first at bat and then they can't recover. It's starting to address all those things. And we had a performance psychologist come into Alabama my sophomore year, and it made a huge difference for us. It's something as simple as creating a routine that even when you're slumping, even when you're on fire, you're looking the exact same at the plate and your mentality is the same at the plate. That was super helpful for being consistent because you're never going to bat 1,000. So how do we have the most professional approach to failure that we possibly can? One of the things that helped me is I went into a big slump my freshman year in college, and then I came out of it and I immediately wrote myself a note for the next time I was in a slump. It literally said, "Dear Cassie, I know this sucks." it was just kind of a roadmap of how to get out of that for the next time I was in it. And talking to my teammates, talking to people who have been in that scenario before. Hey, what might have worked for you? What might have worked for you? And not listening to everything, but maybe chewing on the meat, spitting out the bones, and creating a plan for yourself that you can trust, because it is going to happen. Every single hitter struggles. Just the best hitters are snapping out of it in a much shorter period of time. And you have to practice struggling in order to get good at it.
Now, we had talked to you a little bit before all of this started, and you had mentioned that you've been shut down for 8 days. I'm not sure if you're planning on doing any online, but in the world we live in today, I mean, there's so much out there right now that kids can get better by watching or taking lessons online. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, and about using your resources. You were 13 years old and were shoveling your yard, so you could play ball. If you could talk about that, like taking away the excuses and making the best of what you have online, whether it's a coach or someone you're watching on Instagram or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for even mentioning that. It's certainly been tough to run a facility where you're supposed to coach athletes and then not be allowed to coach athletes. So we have a couple of things right now. We have a online training program. So we will train athletes for a month. They can utilize straight from our app. And then we also have that for strength and conditioning that we have for softball. And I've been doing a lot of FaceTime sessions with athletes. I used to do it for people who couldn't even get into the building, but now I've obviously been utilizing it a lot more. So I certainly have certainly reach out to me on Instagram or anything like that, and we can set something up if that's what people are interested in. But as far as online goes, the package deal has a ton of information out there. The softball school, I couldn't recommend it any higher. I just think staying involved with your sport and looking into all of that is awesome. And I actually zoned. There's a place in New Jersey. It's called Zone. Duke Baxter has one of the best defensive drills. So I would check him out on social media too. So Softball Strength Academy has, and which is my account. I have a lot of hitting stuff. Coach Matt Lyle has a lot of hitting stuff. Coach Duke Baxter has his defensive work, and then the package deal can have just a good mix of everything.
Excellent.
Now, as we wind down here a little bit, was there any topics here that you wanted to touch on that maybe we haven't brought up yet that you wanted to talk about? I mean,
you know what? Honestly, it's more just I reached out to you guys because I want to be able to pour back into the softball community. I think it is such a special community to be able to be intertwined with, and I hope I can encourage some more coaches to continue to share and then continue to learn, so that we can make a much better impact on the athletes that we have. So thank you guys for providing this platform and even having me on here, because I think the more that we can share about what people have going on, the better our sport's going to get.
I'll tell you one thing. The softball community is special. We started this podcast for many of our longtime listeners as a baseball podcast, and our daughters got so into watching Florida State win the national title the other year. We were like, what are we doing? We got two daughters who play travel softball who are loving it. Why don't we dive into this side of it? And, 6 months in, we decided to make a right turn. And it's probably been one of the best decisions we've ever made. And for two dads of daughters who play softball, our podcasts on the softball side are so engaging and so good. And everybody's so welcoming. And our information and knowledge and everything has grown so much in the past 2 years. We can't thank the softball community enough, honestly.
Yeah. We're actually planning on hopefully if the season pans out, we're putting together a team here for softball 14U. So looking forward to that. So that's something I never thought I'd ever do. But I've learned so much.
Good for you guys.
Yeah, I've learned so much just from doing this, and I was a baseball player, and I'm coaching baseball as well. So I learned a lot from this guy next to me. But all of the amazing people we've had on here for softball has just been so tremendous. So I'm glad you said that, because we say it all the time. Like these softball followers are open-minded. They're awesome.
Just so everybody knows, and Cassie, out of our top 10 episodes, our most downloaded, 9 of them are softball. That's incredible.
That's incredible.
And honestly, Coach Ferber, I think, from up there in New York, up by you, baseball guy, he's our biggest baseball podcast, and we've had some great baseball people on. But the softball community is loyal, dedicated, and man, every week we get questions from parents or coaches reaching out to ask guests like you, and it's unbelievable. And I think just watching online on Instagram and stuff like you're talking about right now, man, the community is really just coming together, and everybody, like you talk about what the package deal's doing. I mean, they got how many coaches in that group, you know what I mean, that are going to be putting stuff on over the next 6 weeks. Incredible.
It's like a dream team, that's for sure.
I always said the package deal should do a charity like softball game or something. It would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Gosh, something, for sure.
Lots of competitive people in that group, though. I don't think it would be I don't think it would be slow pitch.
Who's the starting pitcher?
Dude, it might start off friendly, but the old competitive genes would kick in for sure.
Right. I wanted to ask this question. I love this because we always have a different response. And after talking to you, and you've done a lot of reflection in your day. You said you did a lot of journaling. If you could go back and tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
Ooh, that is a great question. I tried so hard to appreciate everything that I had going on, whether that was getting to play in high school with some of my best friends or getting a chance to play softball with Alabama. I wish I took maybe some more mental pictures. I wish I would have just appreciated a little bit more having a catch with one of my best friends at Alabama, or just being surrounded by the sport and being able to play and jogging on and off the field. And not that I even tried to take it for granted or anything. I just it is so special to play this game and to be outside and to be surrounded by phenomenal athletes. And it would just be to pause a little bit more, just take a couple more seconds every now and then and just pause and realize, you might have just struck out twice in a game on TV, but look at what you're doing right now. You look at what you get to do. So that might be the one thing I'd say to myself.
What would be the biggest piece of advice for the player out there, the coach, parent listening to this podcast right now that wants to become the best player they can be? And I say that because I think too many people get wrapped up in D1 or bust, all those types of things, when, you got to pick a school that's the right fit, the educational side of it, your family situation. But, what would be the biggest piece of advice you would give those people out there?
Yeah, that's a great point. The D1 or bust. And I think it was such a blessing that I didn't grow up with a smartphone, because I had nothing really to compare it to. I couldn't look inside anyone else's at-home training regimen or anything and think, I'm not doing enough, or I could, whatever it may be. And I think everybody knows that there is certain potential left on the table, and they know that there is a certain level of softball athlete they want to be. And my recommendation would just be constantly keep pushing towards your potential. Even if you end up with a coach that doesn't treat you right and maybe you get discouraged, you can still ask yourself, okay, regardless of how this coach is treating me, I have a certain potential that exists. I have a certain level of a person and an athlete that I think I can achieve, and it doesn't external circumstances. How can I get to that point? And I used to write it on my wrist every day. I wrote your best, because I don't know what else could you possibly do. You could empty your take every day and then say, okay, did I take maybe one more step towards the person I think I can be? And I think just staying focused on your personal and how you can help those around you. I think, gosh, you take care of those two things and you're going to live a happy life and sleep really well at night, I think, and not stress too much about everything else.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would be some of your goals? I mean, you have a lot going on. Obviously, with everything that's happening right now. You got to get the doors back open, get the athletes back in, get everybody ramped back up to get the seasons going. But what would be some of your goals over the next 3 to 5 years, professionally and even, for yourself personally?
That's a great question. I hope to still be impacting athletes for the better. I really, people have asked, do you want to do college? Do you want to do middle school? Do you want to do high school? And to be honest, it was just to be able to try to make the biggest impact. And actually, Coach Murphy said to me too, he goes, listen, you're going to find the platform to do it in. And he said, my platform's Alabama softball. Your platform's going to be Athletes Warehouse, whatever, for the time being. You know what I mean? So
right.
I hope I can still just be involved in the sport and with athletes and continue to keep my eyes set on making that impact. That would be my goal. And I think if I'm doing that, I'll be happy with that. And I hope in the next 5 years I can get at least one more book out. That's another one of my goals.
That's excellent. Those are great goals. This next question we like asking just because when we started this podcast, like Tyler said, we were just talking about Major League Baseball, really. And then we had our first interview and we realized that, okay, maybe we didn't have a guy who was currently playing major leagues, but this was a guy who was in the system and he had a story and it connected people and it got us to another person. And then that guy had a story and this girl had a story. So we like to do that. So we were asking you if you could recommend that we reach out to anybody to bring value onto our show for our listeners. Who would that person or people be? Who would those people be?
Yeah, I'm 100% going to recommend Kayla Bro. She was a 3-time All-American for Alabama from Oregon. She was our leadoff hitter and certainly one of the reasons we won the national championship. She's currently an ESPN analyst. And she wrote the foreword to my book. She was a slapper, hitter, and just played with her hair on fire. And she just has been so entrenched in the game and so involved in the game. She has an unbelievable perspective on it, and you will not go wrong having her on here for sure. So that would be my softball recommendation. And then if you wanted to kind of venture outside the box as far as somebody who would be able to really give good insight to the training side of a softball athlete, my business partner, Nick Serio, he has his doctorate in performance psychology, and he's a certified strength and conditioning coach. He's worked with baseball athletes and having them throw harder, but really the psychology of training a young athlete. And it's so if you were interested in a little bit of a different route to kind of those are two separate ends of the spectrum, but I'd recommend both of those guys.
And who is your partner? Can you say the name one more time?
Yeah, Nicholas Serio.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, and honestly, we love both sides of the spectrum because, the whole point of this is to connect people with information that maybe they couldn't have otherwise. Like, the 13-year-old shovel in their driveway. They don't have a shovel in their yard. They don't have information. We're trying to provide it. So any of these people with a story and information they can share to help people,
yep.
Get from whether you're that travel player trying out for high school for the first time, or you're that, travel player trying to get to college or trying to get to varsity. For us, it's all about helping people just get to the next level, no matter what that level may be. Because it's always an accomplishment.
100%.
It's always accomplishment to level up. You know what I mean? At least I think so. Awesome. If you can you let our listeners know where they can find you out online, where they can, follow along with your hitting stuff and all of that. And if they want to reach out maybe to set up something online or something with you, where could they do that at?
Buy the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so where could they get your book?
Guys.
Good call, Dan.
Sure. So the book is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's Finished It, A Team's Journey to Winning It All. So both those sites, you can look at it. My personal email address, it's Cassie at athleteswarehouse.com. So athletes, ATHLETES, warehouse, WAREHOUSE.com. And Cassie is CASSIE. So that's my personal email that you guys can reach out to. At Softball Strength Academy is the Instagram where I post a lot of softball drills. And then my coach's account, which will be a little bit more of an in-depth dive into the actual breakdown of the swing, is at coach_Cassie RB. So that's a lot of information. I can certainly type that up somewhere if you need it, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys and share all that information. Because like I said, I've been afforded such a unique opportunity to have so much, the game gives me so much. whether that was opportunities to play or opportunities to meet people. And I'm indebted in the best of ways to the game. And I love being able to just share what I got.
That's awesome. Love it. Well, we have one more question for you. This is one of my favorites. Tyler and I are big music fans. I'm a musician, and I feel that music.
I'm the fan. You're the musician.
But I feel that music tells a lot about a person, especially in a situation where you're going up to, change the direction of a game for the better. So if you had one more at bat, let's just say, we'll say an Olympic at bat. What song would you choose as your walk-up song?
Gosh, I would stick with the same one I had in college. It was "This Town" by OIR. OIR has been my favorite band forever, and it is that song to me. The first line says, it talks about if they can have anyone with them, they want them there with me, and that's exactly what I want with my family. If I want anyone there, I'd want them in Alabama with me, and just I don't know. It's a good beat. It's a good song, and I was in love with that one. It put me in a good mood to hit.
That's awesome. I love OAR. Black Rock was my favorite song because it's right down the road in Maryland there. So I love that band.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was huge when I graduated. So cool.
Great choice.
Yeah, great choice. Cassie, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. You've given so much good information for our listeners and for us who, we're just so happy you could join us, and we're glad we could make it work. And we wish you the best of luck in this crazy situation. I'm sure everything will be back up and running here for you shortly. So we wish you the best.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Best of luck to you. Stay healthy and get back to work as soon as you can.
I will. Gotcha, for sure. Thanks, guys.
See ya.